The gods of Asgard gathered in their golden hall, laughing as they hurled spears and axes at their beloved Balder. Weapons that could shatter mountains merely bounced off his skin, for he was blessed with invincibility, or so they thought. But in the shadows, the trickster Loki watched with a smile sharper than any blade. He knew the secret that would bring their joy crashing down. With a whisper and a twist of fate, the God of Light fell, pierced by a single dart of mistletoe. The world turned cold, the sun dimmed, and in that moment the most radiant of the Norse gods was gone. This is the tragedy of Balder, whose light once shone so brightly that even the gods marveled at his presence. He was purity embodied, joy made flesh, a beacon in the harsh world of Viking myths. Yet his story is more than just a tale of death. It's woven into the very fabric of Norse legend, a thread connecting prophecies, betrayals, and even the end of the world itself. Today, we uncover 25 stories of Balder, from his birth under a sky streaked with omens to his shadowed throne in the land of the dead. These aren't just dusty old myths. They're sagas of love and loss, of loopholes in fate, and of a light so enduring it outlasts even Ragnarok. So stay with me, because by the end, you'll see why ancient skalds whispered Balder's name with both wonder and sorrow, and why his legends still haunt us today. Now let us step back to where it all began, to a moment of light before the shadow. Balder's story starts not with his death, but with his birth, a birth foretold to be as radiant as it was doomed. Born to Odin, the All-Father, and Frigg, the goddess of foresight and protection, Balder entered the world beneath skies heavy with prophecy. From his first breath he glowed. His hair was sunlight spun into gold, his skin like polished ivory, and his laughter carried the warmth of midsummer. Even among the gods he stood apart, a being of such purity that flowers unfurled in his footsteps. But beneath this brilliance lurked a dark whisper, one that reached Odin's ears long before Balder took his first step. A seer's vision haunted the All-Father. His son would die young, slain by a hand both familiar and unforeseen. This prophecy carved a rift through Asgard's joy, for how could darkness touch one so luminous? Yet Norse myths teach us that even gods cannot outrun fate. What makes Balder's tale so poignant is not just the inevitability of his death, but the desperate, loving lengths taken to defy it. Enter Frigg, the devoted mother who refused to surrender to prophecy. If fate demanded her son's life, she would stitch loopholes into destiny itself, and so she embarked on a quest as meticulous as it was heartbreaking. One by one, Frigg traveled the realms, demanding oaths from every substance, every force that might harm Balder. Fire vowed not to burn him, iron pledged not to pierce him. Stone swore not to crush him. Even the wildest beasts, wolves, serpents, storms bowed to her pleas. Earth, air, and water became his silent guardians. For a time, it seemed Frigg had outwitted the Norns, the weavers of fate. The gods rejoiced, turning Balder's invulnerability into a game. They laughed as they struck him with blades that shattered like ice, hurled boulders that crumbled to dust at his feet. In their golden hall, Balder stood unscathed, a living testament to a mother's love. But Frigg's victory was fragile, because in her haste, in her exhaustion, she overlooked one thing. A small, pale shoot clinging to an oak's bark, harmless, unassuming. The mistletoe, too young to swear an oath, too fragile to seem a threat. And in that tiny gap between Frigg's vigilance and fate's cruelty, Loki would later slither, armed with the one thing that could undo everything. Here lies the tragedy of Balder's birth. It was never just a beginning. It was a countdown. The prophecy loomed, the oaths were a temporary shield, and the gods' merriment a prelude to grief. Yet in this first chapter, we see the essence of Balder's myth, a light so dazzling it inspired both boundless love and inevitable loss. Next, we'll see how these threads unravel in the gods' own halls, where laughter turns to ash and a game becomes a funeral. But even in the realm of the gods, innocence can be fleeting. What began as a celebration of Balder's invulnerability soon twisted into something darker, a game that masked deeper tensions among the Aesir. Picture the scene, the great hall of Asgard, filled with laughter and the clatter of weapons against what seemed like an impenetrable shield. The gods took turns hurling spears, axes, even boulders at Balder, watching them shatter or bounce away harmlessly. It was sport to them, a way to marvel at Frigg's success in bending fate to her will. Yet beneath the surface, not everyone shared in the joy. Loki, the trickster, watched these displays with growing irritation. Where others saw a miracle, he saw an injustice. Why should Balder, already beloved beyond measure, be granted yet another privilege, immunity to harm? The more the gods cheered, the more Loki's resentment festered. Jealousy coiled around his thoughts like a serpent, whispering that this was not fairness but favoritism. And if there was one thing Loki could not abide, it was the illusion of perfection. The game itself revealed more than just Balder's invulnerability. It exposed the fragile harmony of the gods. Odin, though proud, carried the weight of his son's prophesied death in every silence. Thor, ever boisterous, swung his hammer with a little too much force, as if testing the limits of Frigg's oaths. Even Balder, radiant as ever, began to wear his smiles like armor. Did he too sense the unease lurking behind the laughter? Loki's presence in these gatherings became increasingly pointed. He would linger at the edges, offering backhanded compliments or feigning disinterest while studying every throw, every reaction. His questions, seemingly innocent, were anything but. How strange, he mused aloud one day, that even the mightiest weapons fail against him. Surely Frigg didn't ask everything to swear an oath. The gods dismissed his words as typical mischief, but the seed was planted. Loki, ever the observer, had noticed what others missed: Frigg's exhaustion, the haste in her quest, the possibility of a loophole. This was more than a game to him. It was a puzzle to solve, a flaw to exploit, and in that moment the trickster's path became clear. If Balder's invulnerability had a weakness, Loki would find it, not for justice, but for the sheer thrill of unraveling the god's pride. The stage was set for tragedy, though none yet realized it. The weapons that once clattered harmlessly at Balder's feet would soon be replaced by something far smaller, far deadlier. And Loki, smiling in the shadows, would be the one to hand it over. Next, we'll uncover the fateful oversight that would unravel everything, the one thing Frigg forgot to protect. Now, as the threads of fate tighten, we come to the moment that would undo all of Frigg's careful planning. You see, in her desperate quest to shield Balder from harm, the goddess had traveled the length of the world, demanding oaths from every conceivable threat: iron and wood, fire and water, beasts and stones. Each swore never to harm her son, weaving an invisible armor around him. But in her haste, she overlooked something small, something seemingly insignificant. The mistletoe, tender and young, the mistletoe clung to the branches of oaks, barely noticed by gods or mortals alike. To Frigg, it must have seemed harmless, too delicate to warrant an oath. A whisper of green in a world of steel and storm. Yet this was no ordinary plant. In Norse lore, mistletoe was a paradox, both a symbol of life, thriving in winter's grip, and a herald of death, its berries white as bone. It existed between realms, neither tree nor ground dweller, a thing outside the natural order. And in that ambiguity, Loki saw his chance. Here's where the tragedy deepens. Frigg's omission wasn't just an oversight, it was a reflection of the very nature of fate. No matter how thorough, how fiercely a parent loves, there's always a crack in the shield. The mistletoe's fragility mirrored Balder's own vulnerability. He was the god of light, pure and untainted, but light by its nature is fleeting. It dances just beyond the grasp of darkness, never truly safe. Loki, ever the opportunist, didn't merely stumble upon this loophole. He sought it, peeling back Frigg's efforts like layers of bark until he found the soft core beneath. Some versions of the myth say he disguised himself as an old woman, visiting Frigg in her hall and coaxing the truth from her with feigned curiosity. Surely, he might have murmured, "You didn't trouble the little mistletoe, it's so slight, so harmless," and Frigg, weary from her labors, admitted it. That admission was all Loki needed. The mistletoe's symbolism here is chilling. It wasn't a weapon of brute force but of precision, a thing so unassuming it slipped past divine notice. When Loki carved it into a dart, he wasn't just crafting a tool, he was twisting nature itself. The plant that symbolized peace and renewal became an instrument of death, a cruel joke on the god's arrogance. Even its placement mattered. Mistletoe grows between earth and sky, a bridge between worlds, just as Baldur's death would bridge the realms of the living and the dead. And so the stage was set. The next time the gods gathered to play their lethal game, Loki moved quietly among them, the mistletoe dart concealed in his palm. He approached Hertha, Baldur's blind brother, with an offer wrapped in false kindness. Here, he might have said, pressing the dart into Hertha's hand, "Let me guide your aim." Shouldn't you two share in the joy? The irony was exquisite, a blind god, an unseen weapon, and the one flaw in a mother's love. What happens next would shake Asgard to its core. But for now, remember this, the greatest tragedies often hinge not on the mighty, but on the overlooked. The mistletoe, frail as a breath, would prove heavier than any mountain in the scales of fate. Coming next, we'll witness the unthinkable the moment joy turns to mourning and Baldur's light flickers out. Now, with the trap set, let's step into Loki's shadowed mind. This wasn't just mischief, it was a calculated strike. Loki, the shapeshifter, the whisperer at the edges of fate, didn't act on impulse. His deception was a slow poison brewed with patience. After learning of the mistletoe's unsworn oath, he didn't rush to pluck it. No, he let the knowledge simmer, turning it over like a knife in his palm. Here's the chilling truth. Loki didn't just exploit a loophole, he weaponized Frigg's love. The dart he fashioned wasn't crude. Norse myths often depict weapons as extensions of their wielder's intent. A dwarf-forged sword carries greed, Thor's hammer channels righteousness, but Loki's mistletoe dart, it was betrayal given form. Some scholars suggest he may have carved it with runes of deception, twisting the plant's natural vitality into something malicious. Imagine the scene, Loki alone in some forgotten grove, his fingers working the pale wood, murmuring spells that turned a sprig of peace into a needle of doom. Then came the manipulation of Hertha. This is where Loki's cruelty shines brightest. Hertha wasn't just blind, he was gentle, a god who'd never joined the others in their games of throwing weapons at Baldur. Loki preyed on that isolation. In the prose Edda, Snorri Sturluson paints their encounter with awful simplicity. Loki didn't bribe or threaten Hertha, he appealed to his loneliness. "Wouldn't you like to participate?" he might have whispered, to feel the laughter, the camaraderie. Hertha's hesitation wasn't fear, it was the ache of exclusion. The dart's delivery was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Loki didn't just hand it over, he positioned himself as Hertha's ally. "Here, let me guide your arm," he offered, transforming himself into the one person who'd finally include the blind god. And in that moment, Hertha wasn't a murderer, he was a brother, eager to belong. Loki's fingers on his wrist, his voice murmuring direction, all of it masked the truth. The trickster didn't just aim the dart, he aimed Hertha's heart. Consider the layers here. Hertha's blindness meant he couldn't see the mistletoe's delicate leaves, couldn't know it was different from the axes and spears that harmlessly bounced off Baldur. Loki exploited that sensory void, replacing sight with trust. And when the dart flew, it wasn't Hertha's strength behind it, it was Loki's will channeled through another's hand. The dwarves might have forged unbreakable chains to bind Fenrir, but Loki's true craftsmanship was this, turning love into a weapon. What happens next is inevitable, yet no less devastating. But before we witness the fatal throw, pause on this. Loki's greatest trick wasn't fooling the gods. It was making them complicit. In their games, their arrogance, their unthinking joy, they'd created the perfect conditions for tragedy. And Loki, ever the mirror, showed them the cracks in their own brilliance. Coming next, the unraveling. The moment a single dart changes everything, and Asgard learns that even light must fall. The moment arrives with the weight of inevitability. Hertha's hand lifts, guided by Loki's whispered assurance, the mistletoe dart resting lightly between his fingers. The air in Asgard stills, as if the very world holds its breath. The other gods laugh, their voices bright with the usual delight of their game, unaware that this time the rules have been broken. Hertha hesitates for only a heartbeat, then releases the dart. It flies with a quiet grace, so unlike the thunder of Thor's hammer or the clang of Odin's spear. No one expects danger, no one watches with fear. Balder stands radiant as ever, his face turned toward the sound of his brother's voice, and then impact. The dart pierces his chest, and for one terrible, suspended second, nothing happens. Then Balder stumbles, his light flickers, the laughter dies, the silence that follows is deafening. The gods stare, uncomprehending, as Balder crumples to the ground. This isn't possible, nothing can harm him. Frigg's oaths were absolute except for one. The realization crashes over them like a wave, the mistletoe, the one thing she overlooked, and now it has cut down the brightest of them all. Odin is the first to move, his single eye wide with disbelief. He reaches for his son, but even the All-Father's power cannot undo what has been done. Frigg's wail tears through the silence, a sound of pure anguish. The gods rush forward, their hands outstretched as if they might catch Balder's fading light, but it slips through their fingers like mist. The shock is absolute. This wasn't just a game anymore, this was betrayal, this was death. Loki, of course, is already gone, his work is done. He doesn't stay to see the aftermath, doesn't linger to witness the devastation he's wrought. But the others, they are frozen in their grief. Thor's grip tightens on Mjolnir, his face dark with rage and helplessness. Heimdall's golden eyes, which see all, are clouded with tears. Even the giants, those eternal enemies of Asgard, pause in their realms as if sensing the world's balance shift. Hertha stands alone, his hands trembling. He doesn't understand what's happened, only that the laughter has turned to screams, the joy to horror. "What have I done?" he whispers, but no one answers. The blind god, who only wished to be part of the game, now bears the weight of a crime he never intended. Loki's poison has worked perfectly. Hertha is the hand, but the trickster is the mind behind the blow. And Balder, his light doesn't fade slowly. It vanishes all at once like a snuffed candle. The god of joy, of purity, of everything good in Asgard gone. The shadows left behind seem deeper, colder. The gods stare at one another, their faces hollow with loss. They had thought themselves invincible, immortal. But Balder's death is a brutal reminder, even gods can fall. What comes next is mourning, fury, and a reckoning. But for now, in this shattered moment, there is only grief, raw and unanswerable. The world is dimmer without Balder's light, and Asgard will never be the same. As the gods gather around their fallen brother, a question lingers in the air, unspoken but heavy. If even Balder was not safe, what hope remains for the rest of them? The answer, when it comes, will shake the foundations of the 9 realms. Now, in the hollow silence that follows, the gods of Asgard face something they never imagined: helplessness. The laughter, the games, the joy that once filled their halls are swallowed by a grief too vast for words. Odin, the All-Father, whose wisdom stretches across the ages, stands motionless beside his fallen son. His single eye does not blink, does not weep. It simply stares, as if he could will Balder's light back into the world by sheer force of longing. But even Odin's power has limits, and in this moment he is not a ruler, not a warrior, just a father broken by loss. Frigg's anguish is anything but silent. Her cries echo through the golden halls, a sound so raw it chills the blood. She, who wove the very threads of protection around her son, now clutches his lifeless form as if her embrace could undo the mistletoe's bite. Her fingers trace the wound, trembling with the horrible truth. Her love was not enough. The oath she secured from fire and iron, from stone and sea, meant nothing in the face of one small, overlooked sprig. The weight of that oversight crushes her, and the other gods turn away, unable to bear her sorrow. Thor, usually so quick to act, to thunder into battle, stands like a statue. Mjolnir hangs limp in his grip, its power useless here. His jaw clenches, but no words come. What is there to say? His strength, legendary across the 9 realms, cannot punch through death's veil. Nearby, Heimdall's golden gaze, which once saw the sunrise before it dawned, is dimmed with tears. Even the ever-watchful guardian could not foresee this. And then something astonishing. From the far reaches of Jotunheim, home of the frost giants, comes a sound none expected, weeping. The enemies of Asgard, those who once reveled in the gods' misfortunes, now mourn Baldur's passing. For though he was a god of their foes, his light knew no allegiance. His kindness touched even the coldest hearts. His laughter disarmed the fiercest grudges. In death, he unites the realms in grief, proving that goodness transcends even the oldest hatreds. The preparations begin in quiet solemnity. Baldur cannot be left here, not like this. His body must be honored, his pyre built to match his radiance. The gods move as if in a dream, gathering treasures from across Asgard. His armor, his rings, the gifts he once cherished. His wife, Nanna, arrives, her face pale as moonlit snow. She does not speak, she does not need to. The way she folds herself beside Baldur's body says everything. Her heart has shattered with his. And so, in the shadow of their grief, the Aesir begin the slow, sacred work of farewell. They do not yet know the depths of hell's mercy or the cruelty still to come. For now, there is only this, the gathering of wood, the piling of tokens, the unanswerable silence where Baldur's laughter once rang. The light of Asgard has gone out. And as the first flames of his pyre lick the sky, the gods are left to wonder, can a world so dark ever be bright again? Yet even in their despair, a resolve hardens. Loki's hand may have struck the blow, but the trickster will not escape their wrath. The mourning is not over, but soon neither will be the hunt. As the sorrow of Asgard settles into solemn purpose, the gods turn their hands to a task both sacred and unbearable, the building of Baldur's funeral pyre. For a being of such light, mere flames would not suffice. Every detail must reflect his radiance, his worth, and so they gather at the shore where his great ship, Hringhorni, waits like a slumbering beast. It is said to be the finest vessel ever crafted, its timbers carved with runes of protection, its prow curved like a swan's neck, graceful even in stillness. The gods line its deck with treasures, Baldur's golden armor, his shield polished to a mirror's shine, the rings he once gifted to friends and kin. Even the softest furs are laid beneath him, as if he might yet feel their warmth. Yet Hringhorni is so massive that none in Asgard can move it, not even Thor, whose strength uproots mountains, and so they call upon Hyrrokin, a giantess from the wild lands beyond. She arrives not on foot but astride a monstrous wolf, its fangs dripping, her own eyes gleaming with something between reverence and amusement. The gods tense, for old enmities linger. But Hyrrokin does not gloat. With a single push of her massive hand, the ship groans, then slides into the water, its wake rippling like liquid silver. The force of her shove is so great that the earth itself trembles, sparks flying where the hull scrapes stone. Thor, ever quick to anger, raises Mjolnir until Odin stays his hand. Today, even a giant's aid is sacred, but the true devastation comes when Nanna, Baldur's beloved wife, approaches. She has not spoken since his death, her grief a silent storm. Now, as she gazes upon his face one last time, her knees give way. The gods reach for her, but she shakes her head. With a sigh softer than snowfall, her spirit slips free, her body curling lifeless beside Baldur's. Some say her heart simply could not bear the parting. Others whisper that she chose the path Freya once walked, to follow her love beyond death's gate. Whatever the truth, the gods lay her beside him, their fingers entwined, her dark hair fanned across his chest like a shadow embracing the light. Now the torches are brought forward. Odin takes the first, his hand steady despite the grief etched in his face. As he touches flame to kindling, he presses something into the pyre, a secret offering known only to him. Perhaps a whisper of wisdom, a promise, or a spell for the afterlife. The fire catches, racing up the mast, swallowing the sails in a roar of gold and crimson. The heat is so fierce the gods step back, their faces lit by the inferno. And as the smoke twists into the sky, a final marvel unfolds. The flames do not blacken Baldur's body. Even in death, his purity holds. His skin remains luminous, his face serene, as if he merely sleeps beneath the blaze. For days, the pyre burns, visible from every realm. In Jotunheim, giants pause to watch the glow on the horizon. In Midgard, humans whisper of a strange, bright star. And in Asgard, the gods stand vigil, their eyes roar with tears and firelight. Hringhorni becomes ash, its treasures melted into the sea, but the memory of that ship, of the giantess's strength, of Nanna's unbreakable love, these do not fade. The funeral is not an end, but a beacon. For though Baldur's light is gone from the world, the echo of it lingers, a reminder that even the brightest flames may one day rise again. And so the gods turn their faces from the embers toward the next impossible task, a journey to the land of the dead where hope still flickers barely. As the embers of Baldur's funeral pyre cool, a sliver of hope remains. The gods cannot accept that his light is lost forever, and so they turn to Hermod, Odin's swiftest messenger, for a task both daring and desperate. Mounted on Sleipnir, the eight-legged steed whose strides blur the lines between worlds, Hermod prepares to ride where few living beings dare, into the shadowed realm of hell itself. His mission is simple in word but impossible in weight, to plead with the goddess of the dead for Baldur's return. Sleipnir's hooves thunder across the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge trembling beneath them, then plunge into the icy mist of Niflheim. The air grows thick with whispers, the path winding through valleys choked with fog, where the shapes of the unquiet dead flit like moths. Hermod rides unflinching, his grip tight on the reins, for even Odin's horse shudders at the scent of Helheim's gates. They loom at last massive, iron-bound, their hinges rusted with the weight of countless souls. A monstrous hound, Garma, paces before them, saliva pooling around dagger like fangs. But Hermod does not slow. Sleipnir leaps clean over the beast and the gates creak open, as if the realm itself recognizes the urgency of his errand. Hell's Hall is a cavern of echoes, its ceiling lost in gloom, its floors slick with a cold that seeps into the bones. The goddess waits atop a throne of blackened wood, her face split between beauty and decay, one side alive, the other skeletal. She does not rise as Hermod approaches, but her single living eye gleams with curiosity. Here, in this place where time crawls, even a god's messenger is an oddity. Hermod's voice does not waver as he speaks. He recounts Baldur's kindness, the grief of the gods, the weeping of all creation. He offers treasures, promises, even the unspoken threat of Odin's displeasure. But Hel is no petty trickster to be cowed or bribed. She listens, her fingers tapping the armrest before delivering her decree. If every being in the 9 realms, living or dead, weeps for Baldur, he may return. If even one refuses, he remains hers forever. The terms seem fair, even merciful, until Hermod glimpses the flicker in Hel's eye. She knows, as he does, that no decree of the gods is ever so simple. Someone will refuse, the question is who. With a nod, Hel dismisses him, her final words hanging like frost. Prove his worth and he is yours. Hermod rides back through the gates, Sleipnir's breath ragged with exhaustion. The journey to Asgard is silent, the weight of hope heavier now, for it carries a cruel edge. The gods will rally the worlds to weep, but Hermod, ever observant, cannot shake the thought somewhere in some hidden corner a single voice will withhold its tears. And Loki, still slinking in the shadows, has not yet played his final card. The stage is set for a trial of grief, a test of love where the fate of light itself hangs on something as fragile as a tear. Now the gods face their greatest challenge yet, not battle nor magic, but a single, sorrowful task. Hel's condition is clear. If every being in the 9 realms weeps for Balder, he will walk free from her halls. But if one refuses, his light remains extinguished forever. As word spreads, the worlds stir with collective grief. In Asgard, the gods themselves lead the mourning, their golden halls echoing with lamentations. Thor, usually fierce with his hammer, weeps openly. Freyja's tears fall like golden rain, and even Odin, the All-Father, bows his head in silence. The Aesir send messengers racing to the dwarves in their caverns, the elves in their shimmering glades, the giants on their frozen plains. Every creature, great and small, is called to weep. The response is overwhelming. Stones dampen with dew as if the very earth weeps. Trees drip sap like amber tears. Fire hisses with sorrow, waves collapse upon shores in grief. In Nidavellir, the dwarves pause their forging, their anvils silent for the first time in memory. The frost giants, who once reveled in Balder's vulnerability, now find their hearts strangely heavy. For a moment, it seems Hel's condition will be met, until Loki slithers into the shadows. Disguised as the giantess Thirk, he lurks near a cave in Jotunheim where messengers have yet to tread. When they find her, she sits hunched, her face hidden in ragged furs. "Why should I weep for Balder?" she croaks, her voice dripping with false indifference. "He never gave me joy, nor shelter, nor kindness. Let Hel keep what she holds." The messengers beg, threaten, but Thirk only spits into the fire, her dry eyes gleaming with malice. Back in Asgard, the gods' hope curdles into dread. They know with sinking certainty that this refusal is no accident. Loki's hand is invisible but unmistakable, his final, cruelest jest. The giantess's words are a blade twisted in the wound, for Hel's decree was absolute. Not most, not nearly all, but every being must weep. A single withheld tear is enough. The revelation crashes upon them like a wave. Balder, the beloved, will stay in Hel's grasp, not for lack of love, but because hatred, however small, cannot be erased. Even the gods' power has limits, and Loki, ever the opportunist, has found the one crack in their unity. The irony is bitter. Balder, who embodied purity, is doomed by the impurity of the world itself. Yet in this despair there is a grim lesson. The gods now see what they long ignored, that darkness persists even in the brightest realms. Loki's sabotage is a mirror held up to their own flaws, a reminder that no joy is untainted, no light without shadow. And so, as the 9 realms fall silent once more, the weight of failure settles over Asgard. But this is not the end. Somewhere in Hel's halls, Balder waits, and the threads of fate, though frayed, are not yet severed. As darkness seeps deeper into the 9 realms, the full weight of Thirk's refusal becomes clear. The gods' desperate efforts to reclaim Balder have unraveled with a single act of defiance, one dry-eyed giantess who would not weep. But this is no ordinary refusal. Hidden beneath the ragged furs of Thirk lies Loki, his malice masquerading as indifference. His deception is a masterstroke of cruelty, exploiting the very condition meant to prove Balder's universal love. The tragedy here is not just Loki's betrayal, but the brutal irony of Hel's demand. She did not ask for a majority, nor even near unanimity. Her terms were absolute. Every being, without exception, must shed tears for Balder's return. And in that impossibility, Loki finds his opening. He knows the 9 realms better than anyone, their beauties, their fractures, their capacity for spite. Where love threads through the worlds like golden light, hatred lingers in the cracks, small, stubborn, and utterly irreconcilable. Thirk's dry eyes are proof. No amount of divine power can force true sorrow where none exists. What makes this twist so devastating is its inevitability. The gods, in their grief, believed unity was possible. They forgot that darkness thrives even in the brightest corners. Loki's role as the architect of this failure is no accident. He is chaos incarnate, the flaw in the tapestry, and his refusal to weep is a reminder that perfection is a myth. Balder, the purest of the gods, is doomed not by his own weakness, but by the world's inability to match his light. Yet there's a deeper layer to Loki's cruelty. His sabotage isn't just about keeping Balder in hell, it's about exposing the gods' own limitations. For all their strength, they cannot command genuine emotion. They cannot erase malice or compel love. In this moment, Loki holds up a mirror to their powerlessness, and what reflects back is a truth they've long avoided. Even gods are subject to the flaws of existence. The consequences ripple far beyond Balder's fate. The failure of tears reshapes the destiny of the 9 realms. With Balder confined to hell, the prophecies of Ragnarök draw nearer. His absence leaves Asgard vulnerable, its brightness dimmed. The gods, once buoyed by hope, now grapple with a new reality, one where their beloved will not return until the world itself is reborn. And so, the stage is set for the final acts of Norse mythology, where Balder's light will one day pierce the shadows again, but not before the twilight of the gods. For now, the lesson lingers like a whisper. Loki's trickery reveals a painful truth. No love, however vast, can erase all hatred. No unity is flawless. And sometimes the purest hearts pay the price for the world's imperfections. But even in this despair, there's a glimmer of foreshadowing. Balder's story doesn't end here. His light may be veiled, but it isn't gone. And when the old world falls, his return will herald the dawn of something new. Now the gods turn their grief into fury, and vengeance becomes their only solace. After the cruel trick that sealed Balder's fate, Loki's crimes can no longer be ignored. The gods, who once tolerated his mischief with weary amusement, now see him for what he truly is, the architect of their deepest sorrow. And so begins a reckoning as brutal as it is poetic. Loki flees as he always does, but this time there is no escape. He transforms into a salmon, darting through the rivers of the 9 realms, yet the gods weave a net of his own design, one he once bragged could catch anything. When they drag him ashore, his fate is sealed, but mere death would be too merciful. Instead, the gods devise a punishment that mirrors the agony he inflicted. They take one of Loki's sons, the serpent Jormungandr, and use its own venom as the instrument of torment. With cold precision, they bind Loki beneath the earth, using his son's entrails as chains, a gruesome twist that forces him to confront the consequences of his cruelty. Above him, they place a serpent, its fangs dripping poison onto his face. Loki's wife, Sigyn, stands loyal, holding a bowl to catch the venom. But when she turns to empty it, the drops that fall sear Loki's skin, and his writhing shakes the very foundations of the world. This isn't just punishment, it's symbolism carved into flesh. The entrails that bind him are a reminder. His treachery unraveled the bonds of trust among the gods. The venom mirrors the bitterness he sowed. Even the tremors caused by his pain echo the chaos he unleashed. Most importantly, this torment ties directly back to Balder. Just as Loki ensured Balder's suffering in hell, now he endures his own eternal anguish. The symmetry is perfect, yet even here Loki's defiance lingers. His pain doesn't silence him, it fuels his rage. The earthquakes born from his struggles foreshadow his final role in Ragnarök, where he will break free and lead the forces of destruction. For now, though, the gods have their justice. Balder's light may be gone, but Loki's darkness is chained a fleeting victory in a war that is far from over. And so the tale leaves us with a grim truth. Vengeance doesn't restore what was lost. Balder remains in hell, and Loki's punishment only deepens the cycle of pain. But for a moment, the scales balance. The gods, in their wrath, prove that even the trickster isn't beyond consequences. And as the serpent's poison falls, one question lingers: will it ever be enough? But even in the darkest prophecies, there is a glimmer of hope. While Loki's punishment brings temporary satisfaction, the gods know that the final battle, Ragnarök, looms on the horizon, a cataclysm destined to consume them all. Yet within this doom lies a promise, one that centers on Balder. For when the fires of Ragnarök fade and the sea swallows the ruins of the old world, it is Balder who emerges from the shadows of hell to reclaim his place among the living. The myths speak of this moment with quiet awe. After the great wolf Fenrir devours Odin and Thor falls to the serpent Jörmungandr, after the earth splits and the stars vanish, there, in the silence of a world reborn, Balder returns. His presence is no accident. He is the god of light, and light cannot be extinguished forever. Where the old gods embodied war, wisdom, and storm, Balder represents something purer, renewal. The new world he inherits is not one of endless conflict, but of harmony. The fields grow green again, the rivers run clear, and the surviving gods gather in a hall untouched by the scars of the past. This contrast is deliberate. The destruction of Ragnarök sweeps away the flaws of the old order, Odin's schemes, Thor's fury, Loki's chaos, leaving only Balder's gentleness to guide what comes next. His rule is not a continuation but a rebirth. Where Odin sought knowledge through sacrifice, Balder's reign requires no bloodshed. Where Loki sowed discord, Balder's light fosters unity. Even his death, once a symbol of helplessness, becomes part of a greater cycle. Just as winter gives way to spring, Balder's return signals the dawn after the long night. Yet the myths leave one question unanswered: why him? Why does Balder, of all the gods, survive the end of all things? The answer lies in what he embodies. Unlike the other Aesir, Balder was never a god of power or domination. His divinity was rooted in innocence, in joy, in the unbroken promise of goodness. Ragnarök isn't just an ending, it's a reckoning, a cleansing fire that spares only what is irreplaceable. And in a cosmos where gods and giants alike are bound by fate, Balder's light is the one thing fate cannot erase. So when the survivors of Ragnarök, Balder's brother Hertha, reborn and absolved, the sons of Thor and Odin step into the sunlight of the new world, they do so under a different kind of rule. Balder's return is more than a second chance. It's a testament to the idea that some forces are too vital to lose, even in the face of total destruction. The old gods fought to delay their fate, but Balder's destiny was always to outlast it, and so the cycle completes itself. The god who once lay lifeless on a funeral pyre now stands at the beginning of everything. The tragedy of his death is not erased but transformed, for in the end, Balder's story was never about how he fell, it was about how he rises. Yet even in the heart of darkness, there is a place where light lingers. While Ragnarök looms in the future, Balder and his wife Nanna have already found solace in the most unexpected of realms, the underworld itself. Hell, the mist-shrouded land of the dead, becomes their refuge, a realm where sorrow and joy intertwine in a hauntingly beautiful afterlife. Here, the myths paint a picture both melancholy and tender. Balder, the radiant god whose death shattered the heavens, now walks the halls of hell not as a prisoner but as a revered guest. Nanna, who perished of grief on his funeral pyre, is restored to his side, their love unbroken by death. Unlike the suffering souls around them, they dwell in a secluded hall where the air is sweet with the scent of flowers that never wither, and the light is soft, eternal twilight. It's a paradise, yes, but one tinged with longing, for though they are together, they are still apart from the living world, watching from afar as the gods above mourn their absence. This afterlife is no accident. Hel, the goddess who rules this realm, is not cruel but fair, a keeper of balance. In granting Balder and Nanna this peace, she acknowledges what even the gods could not, that some bonds are too sacred to be severed. Their presence in her domain is a quiet rebellion against fate. While the Aesir scheme to bring Balder back, Hel offers him something they could not, a space where he and Nanna exist untouched by the strife of Asgard. Here there are no prophecies, no tricks, no weapons hurled in jest, only stillness and the quiet certainty of each other's company. Yet the sweetness of their reunion is shadowed by what could have been. The myths whisper that Balder often gazes upward, as if searching for the sun he once embodied, while Nanna weaves tapestries of their lost home. Their love is real, their comfort genuine, but it is a comfort laced with the ache of separation. This is the bittersweet core of their afterlife. They have everything but the world they knew. Even in paradise they are exiles. What makes their story so poignant is its duality. In one breath, it's a testament to enduring love, proof that not even death can part true companions. In the next, it's a reminder that some losses are irreversible. Balder and Nanna's fate in hell is neither tragedy nor triumph. It's something subtler, more human. They are happy, yes, but their happiness is shaped by the absence around them. And perhaps that's why their tale resonates so deeply. It's not about gods or monsters, but about the quiet spaces between joy and grief, where most of life is truly lived. So when the fires of Ragnarök finally come, and Balder steps back into the land of the living, Nanna will follow, not as a shadow, but as his equal, his companion through the long night and into the dawn. For now, though, they wait, two bright souls in a realm of shades, their love a flickering candle in the dark. And in that waiting, there's a lesson. Even in the afterlife, some lights refuse to go out. But long before Balder's fate was sealed by mistletoe, before his light dimmed in the halls of hell, his story was already written in the shadows of his own mind. Few know that the god of joy was haunted by visions, prophetic dreams that whispered of his doom long before Loki's scheme took shape. These weren't mere nightmares, they were fragments of fate, pieces of a puzzle that even Odin, the all-seeing, couldn't ignore. Balder's dreams began as fleeting disturbances, faint as the flutter of a moth's wings. He'd wake with a gasp, the details slipping away like smoke, leaving only a weight in his chest. But soon the visions sharpened. He saw himself standing alone in a field of ash, his radiance swallowed by darkness. He glimpsed hands, some his own, others strangers, reaching for him only to dissolve. Worst of all, he dreamed of his mother, Frigg, weeping over a body wrapped in funeral linen, her sorrow so vivid it branded his waking hours. When Balder finally confessed these dreams to Odin, the Allfather's silence spoke volumes. Odin knew better than any that dreams could be omens. After all, he'd sacrificed an eye at Mimir's well for wisdom, and hung himself on Yggdrasil for the gift of foresight. Yet here was his son, untouched by such bargains, receiving visions freely, and all of them grim. Some versions of the myth suggest Odin even sought answers from the dead, riding Sleipnir to the graves of seers to decipher Balder's fate. But the truth was already taking root. No god, not even Odin, could outrun destiny. What makes these dreams so chilling isn't just their accuracy, it's how they mirror the fragility of light itself. Balder, the embodiment of purity, was tormented by the knowledge of his own end. Imagine the cruel irony, a god who brought joy to others, secretly burdened by a sorrow he couldn't name. His dreams became a kind of prison, one where he was both the prisoner and the guard. He hid his fear from the other gods, laughing as they hurled harmless weapons at him, all while knowing his invulnerability was an illusion. The myths hint that Frigg, too, sensed the coming storm. Some say her desperate quest to secure oaths from every creature, stone, metal, and flame was spurred by Balder's nightmares. If so, it adds a heartbreaking layer to her efforts. This wasn't just a mother's love. It was a race against her son's own foresight, a refusal to let his dreams become reality. And yet, in the end, the very thing she overlooked, the mistletoe, would prove that even the gods can't silence fate's whispers. Balder's dreams are more than a footnote in his tragedy. They're a reminder that foresight isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a weight that bends the shoulders of even the brightest souls. And perhaps that's why Odin, for all his power, couldn't save him. The All-Father, who'd spent ages chasing knowledge, now faced the one truth he couldn't change. No amount of wisdom can unmake a prophecy, yet there's a quiet defiance in Balder's story. Despite his dreams, he never let his dread dim his light. He faced his fate with the same grace he brought to life, a lesson etched in myth. Even when the future is dark, the present still belongs to us. And as we'll soon see, that light, however fleeting, would leave an echo even Ragnarök couldn't extinguish. Now we turn to a song rarely heard in the halls of Asgard, the sorrow of the Valkyries. These warrior maidens, who usually chant of glory and fierce battles, now raise their voices in lament for Balder, their grief as piercing as the spears they wield. The poetic Edda preserves fragments of their dirge, verses woven with the weight of fate and the quiet fury of heroes cheated. Listen to how their words shiver with contradiction. They call Balder the bloodless dead, though no wound marked him. They speak of his hands which never lifted a weapon, yet whose light once shielded realms. Most haunting of all is their refrain, too fair for the fray, too bright for the bier, capturing the cruel paradox of a god felled not in battle but by trickery. These aren't just mourners, they're witnesses to fate's caprice, singing of how even the mightiest defenses crumble before destiny's design. The Valkyries' grief holds a mirror to Norse values. In a culture that exalted dying sword in hand, Balder's death defied the ideal. Their lament twists the concept of heroism. Here was a god whose power lay not in strength, but in gentleness, whose very existence softened the edges of a harsh world. When they wail, who now will warm the frozen earth, they mourn not just a life, but the loss of a force that tempered the god's brutality. Scholars trace a deeper thread in these verses. Valkyries don't merely choose the slain, they weave fate's tapestry. Their sorrow for Balder suggests his death wasn't just an event, but an unraveling of cosmic order. One stanza hints at this, describing the Norns, the weavers of destiny, dropping their looms as Balder fell, their threads tangling like roots upturned. It's as if his passing fractured time itself, leaving even the arbiters of fate momentarily stunned. What makes their lament endure is its refusal of simplicity. Unlike the god's rage or Frigg's despair, the Valkyries' song holds space for both fury and reverence. They curse Loki, yes, but they also scorn the mistletoe's treachery, the blind Hertha's hand, even the complacency of gods who laughed while throwing axes at their brother. Yet woven through this anger is something tender, a recognition that Balder's light exposed the fragility beneath their warrior ethos. Perhaps that's why these verses echo beyond myth. When Vikings carved runes commemorating their dead, they borrowed lines from the Valkyries' lament, grafting Balder's story onto human loss. A 10th century memorial stone in Sweden bears the inscription, "Gone like the god who dreamed his doom," proving how deeply his tragedy resonated. Even in death, Balder bridged realms, not just Asgard and Hell, but myth and mortal sorrow. As the last notes of their dirge fade, we're left with a truth as sharp as Valkyrie steel. Some losses rend the world so deeply that even fate's weavers must pause to grieve. And in that pause, we glimpse the power of Balder's legacy, not as a victim, but as a mirror held up to gods and humans alike, reflecting the cost of light in a darkening world. Now we journey from lament to sanctuary, to the one place Balder's radiance remained untarnished, his hall of Breidablik, where not even shadows dared to linger. Amidst the sorrow and shadows of Balder's fate, there lies a sanctuary untouched by grief, the radiant hall of Breidablik. High in Asgard, where the air shimmers with unspoiled light, this celestial dwelling stands as a testament to Balder's essence. Its name, meaning broad gleaming, captures its very nature, a place so pure that not even the faintest stain of deceit or malice could cross its threshold. Breidablik was no ordinary hall. The prose Edda paints it as the fairest of all dwellings, its pillars forged from sunlight, its rafters woven with the quiet glow of dawn. Unlike the bustling feasts of Valhalla or the smoky forges of the gods, Breidablik thrived in stillness. Here, silence itself was sacred, and the very walls seemed to hum with a harmony no discord could breach. Snorri Sturluson wrote that nothing unclean may enter, a rule not enforced by guards or gates, but by the hall's very nature. Corruption withered before it like frost in flame. What made Breidablik extraordinary wasn't just its beauty, but its symbolism. In a pantheon obsessed with strength and cunning, Baldur's Hall stood as a rebuke to excess. No blood-stained weapons adorned its walls, no boasts echoed across its floors. Instead, it was a refuge for wisdom and reconciliation. Legends whisper that even Odin, the All-Father, would leave his spear outside when visiting, as if the hall's purity demanded a truce from violence. This detail reveals a profound truth. Breidablik wasn't merely a home, it was an ideal made manifest, a glimpse of what the gods could be when unshackled from strife. Archaeology offers tantalizing hints of how deeply this ideal resonated. Viking Age artifacts sometimes depict halls with unusual radiance, gold leaf on doorframes, silver inlays mimicking sunlight, suggesting Breidablik influenced real-world architecture. A 9th century amulet found in Denmark shows a hall surrounded by starbursts, its doors open as if inviting the worthy. Historians speculate such designs reflected a longing for spaces untouched by the era's relentless warfare, much like Baldur's Hall offered respite from Asgard's tensions. Yet Breidablik's purity carried bittersweet irony. Its perfection made Baldur's absence all the more crushing. After his death, the hall didn't darken, it brightened, as if the very stones mourned by amplifying his light. The sagas tell of gods who would sit there alone, not to feast but to remember. In this way, Breidablik became more than a dwelling. It was a living memorial, its untarnished splendor a silent challenge to the chaos that claimed its master. The hall's legacy endures in unexpected ways. Modern Scandinavian churches sometimes incorporate light pillars in their designs, vertical beams meant to evoke divine purity, a distant echo of Breidablik's sunlit columns. Even the word itself persists in Icelandic, where Breidablik describes a moment of crystalline clarity when the world seems washed clean. Such connections remind us that Baldur's Hall wasn't just myth, it was an archetype, a vision of sanctuary that transcends time. As we leave Breidablik behind, its light lingers like a promise, a reminder that even in a world of shadows, pockets of purity endure. And with that thought, we turn to a sweeter mystery, Baldur's hidden connection to the god's most precious elixir, the mead of poetry. Now let's step into a realm where light meets wisdom, where Baldur's brilliance might have extended beyond mere radiance. Among the god's most coveted treasures was the mead of poetry, a magical elixir said to grant unparalleled wisdom and the gift of eloquent speech. While Odin famously went to great lengths to obtain it, there are hints that Baldur, too, had a profound connection to this sacred drink, one that challenges our understanding of his role among the Aesir. The mead of poetry wasn't just a divine beverage. According to myth, it was crafted from the blood of the wise god Kvasir, mixed with honey and fermented in a mystical cauldron. Whoever drank it gained not only knowledge but the power to shape reality with words. Odin, ever hungry for wisdom, tricked the giant Suttung to steal it, an act that cemented his reputation as the god's supreme sage. Yet scattered references in older texts suggest Baldur may have shared this gift, or even embodied its virtues without needing to drink it at all. Consider this curious parallel. Just as the mead transformed those who consumed it into masters of language, Baldur's very presence seemed to inspire harmony and persuasion. Unlike Odin, who often relied on cunning or force, Baldur resolved conflicts through sheer clarity of thought and fairness. The Prose Edda notes that his judgments were so impeccable even Odin would defer to them, a staggering detail given the All-Father's pride. Could this innate wisdom hint at an unspoken bond with the mead's power? Some scholars propose that Baldur's association with light wasn't just physical but metaphorical. In Norse cosmology, light often symbolized enlightenment, and his hall Breidablik was a place of untainted truth. The mead, too, was described as liquid sunlight in certain skaldic verses, with its golden hue mirroring Baldur's radiance. Perhaps the connection wasn't about consumption, but essence, that Baldur, like the mead, represented wisdom in its purest form, untouched by Odin's manipulative streak. Artifacts add weight to this theory. A 10th century amulet found in Sweden depicts a figure, likely Baldur, holding a cup that emits beams of light, an unusual detail not seen in other godly portrayals. Given that drinking vessels were common symbols for the mead of poetry, this could imply a lost tradition linking Baldur to its power. Even more compelling is a line from the Havamal, where Odin boasts of teaching Baldur's runes, a phrase some interpret as secret knowledge passed between them, possibly through the mead's influence. Yet the most poignant evidence lies in Baldur's fate. After his death, the gods couldn't reclaim him, not through force nor Odin's usual trickery. Only words in the form of universal weeping might have bought his return. It's as if the universe itself insisted that Baldur's legacy wasn't one of domination, but of the mead's truest purpose, to unite through understanding. In this light, his story becomes a counterpoint to Odin's, where one god hoarded wisdom, the other became its living expression. So while Odin may have stolen the mead of poetry, Baldur's spirit might have embodied its highest ideal, that true wisdom isn't taken but shared. And with that thought, we turn to an even broader horizon, how Baldur's light stretched beyond Scandinavia, echoing in the myths of distant lands. Now let's venture beyond the borders of Scandinavia, where Baldur's legacy casts a fascinating shadow over neighboring lands. Among the Saxon tribes of ancient Germania, a strikingly similar figure emerges: Baldag, a god whose myths and attributes mirror those of the beloved Norse deity. This cross-cultural connection reveals how divine stories traveled, evolved, and intertwined across early medieval Europe. The Saxons, like their Norse cousins, worshipped a pantheon rich with gods of war, fertility, and cosmic order. Baldag stood among them as a beacon of light and innocence, much like Baldur. The name itself is telling. Linguists trace both Baldur and Baldag back to the Proto-Germanic word balth, as meaning bold or shining. But the parallels run far deeper than etymology. One of the most compelling links comes from the Vita Sancti Willibrordi, a medieval text describing how the missionary Willibrord encountered Saxon pagans in the 8th century. They revered a sacred grove dedicated to Baldag, where they believed no weapon could harm the deity, an unmistakable echo of Baldur's invulnerability. Even more intriguing, the Saxons reportedly celebrated Baldag's death and rebirth in seasonal rites, suggesting a cyclical myth akin to Baldur's return after Ragnarök. Yet differences emerge in the details. While Baldur's death is a tragedy orchestrated by Loki, Saxon sources hint that Baldag's demise was tied to sacrificial rituals, possibly reflecting agricultural cycles. Some scholars argue this aligns with older Indo-European themes of dying and rising gods like Tammuz or Adonis, where a god's death ensures the earth's fertility. Baldag might have been a more overtly agrarian figure, his light symbolizing the sun's life-giving power over crops. Artifacts add another layer to the puzzle. Saxon jewelry and carvings frequently depict a radiant young god holding sheaves of grain, a far cry from Baldur's aristocratic portrayal in Norse art. This could mean Baldag was closer to a patron of farmers, his light less about purity and more about the golden fields of harvest. Still, the shared motifs of invulnerability and resurrection suggest a common mythological root adapted to suit each culture's needs. The historical context deepens the mystery. The Saxons and Norse weren't isolated peoples. They traded, fought, and intermarried for centuries. It's likely their gods influenced one another, with stories morphing as they crossed borders. By the Viking Age, when Norse myths were written down, Baldur's tale may have absorbed, or shed elements from earlier Germanic traditions, including Baldags. What does this mean for our understanding of Balder? His resemblance to Baldag underscores how fluid mythology could be, shaped by time and geography. Where Balder is a tragic hero, Baldag feels more communal, his story woven into the rhythms of Saxon daily life. Yet both embody a universal longing for light in darkness, for hope beyond death. As the next chapter unfolds, we'll see how these fragmented traces of Baldag help us imagine the myths that history forgot. Now let's turn our attention to the whispers and fragments, the lost myths of Balder that history nearly erased. While the prose Edda and poetic Edda preserve his most famous tales, scattered clues suggest there were once far more stories about the god of light, now faded like runes on weathered stone. Take, for instance, a cryptic line from the skaldic poem Husdropa, which describes Balder riding a chariot pulled by horses, brighter than dawn. No other surviving Norse text mentions this chariot, yet it aligns with broader Indo-European traditions of solar deities. Think Apollo's golden chariot or Surya's fiery steeds. Could Balder have originally been a sun god, his chariot crossing the sky each day? Archaeologists point to Bronze Age rock carvings in Sweden depicting a radiant figure in a wheeled vehicle, hinting at an ancient, unrecorded myth. Even more tantalizing are the gaps in Snorri Sturluson's prose Edda. When describing Balder's hall, Breidablik, Snorri calls it a place where nothing unclean may abide, yet he never explains how or why Balder earned such purity. A 9th century skaldic verse, though, refers to Balder performing a ritual of cleansing, washing the sins of men in light. Was there once a tale where Balder purified the gods themselves, like a Norse counterpart to baptism? The lack of details leaves us wondering. Then there's the enigma of Balder's wife, Nanna. Her death from grief is well known, but a runestone from Denmark shows a woman handing Balder a drinking horn flanked by symbols of rebirth. Scholars like Hilda Ellis Davidson propose this might depict a lost fertility rite, where Nanna, not just a mourner, played an active role in Balder's cyclical return. Supporting this, a fragment from the lost Skaldskaparmál mentions Nanna weaving the threads of spring, a phrase that evokes Persephone like themes of seasonal renewal. Archaeology adds another layer. In Norway, a 10th century grave contained a silver amulet stamped with a figure holding a bow, unusual for Balder, who's never linked to archery in surviving texts. But Tacitus, writing about Germanic tribes in the 1st century, noted their worship of a shining hunter god. Could this be a faded memory of Balder as a divine archer, his arrows symbols of sunlight piercing the darkness? Perhaps the most haunting gap surrounds Balder's children. The Eddas mention his son Forseti, god of justice, but Icelandic folktales speak of twin daughters, Bil and Hjuki, who carry the moon's mead. These names appear in a medieval charm against night terrors, implying Balder's offspring had a role in protecting mortals, a theme absent from the canon. Why do these fragments matter? They remind us that mythology is a living tapestry with threads snipped by time. The Balder we know, noble, doomed, resurrected, might be just one version among many. As we piece together these echoes, we glimpse a richer, stranger figure, a sun charioteer, a purifier, maybe even a hunter. The next chapter will delve deeper, exploring how one humble plant, the mistletoe, became the key to his undoing and his enduring legacy. Now let's uncover the hidden power of the mistletoe, a plant that seems ordinary yet holds a spine of magic across cultures. While Norse myth paints it as Balder's downfall, this humble greenery carries a far richer legacy, one woven into rituals of rebirth and protection long before Loki ever plucked its fatal dart. Step beyond Scandinavia, and you'll find mistletoe revered from the druidic groves of ancient Britain to the sunlit forests of Greece. The Celts saw it as a sacred bridge between earth and sky, cutting it with golden sickles during the winter solstice to ensure the sun's return. Pliny the Elder recorded how druids caught the plant mid-air, believing it lost power if it touched the ground. Here, mistletoe wasn't a weapon but a lifeline, a symbol of vitality clinging to barren oaks, defying winter's grip. Sound familiar? Much like Baldur's promised return after Ragnarök, mistletoe embodied nature's unbroken cycle of death and renewal. The Greeks, too, wove mistletoe into tales of resurrection. When Aeneas ventured into the underworld, Virgil describes him carrying a golden bough of mistletoe, his ticket to return to the living. Scholars like Sir James Frazer link this to Baldur's myths, suggesting both stories share roots in ancient solar cults. The plant's golden berries, glowing like tiny suns, may have cemented its tie to light gods who conquered darkness, but the mistletoe's magic wasn't just poetic. Medieval Europe hung it over doorways to repel witches, while Baltic traditions used it in fertility charms. Even today, kissing under mistletoe echoes Norse themes. Its white berries symbolize purity, a nod to Baldur, and the custom mirrors Frigg's later vow to bless any who passed beneath the plant that killed her son. The very thing that destroyed Baldur became a token of love, a twist Loki never foresaw. Dig deeper, and the plant's biology feeds its mythic role. Unlike most flora, mistletoe stays green year-round, thriving when other plants wither. Its ability to resurrect host trees by nourishing them in winter likely inspired associations with healing. Folk medicine from Switzerland to Siberia prescribed mistletoe teas for epilepsy and infertility, ailments once thought to be curses. In this light, Baldur's death by mistletoe isn't just tragedy, it's a paradox. The agent of his demise also carries the seed of his rebirth, just as the plant withers only to bloom again. This duality peaks in Algonquin and Cherokee traditions, where mistletoe, called medicine bough, heals wounds and seals peace treaties. Parallels abound, like Hertha's accidental killing. Some native tales tell of warriors reconciling under mistletoe's branches after bloodshed. It's a global motif, conflict and resolution tangled in one plant. Why does this matter? Because Baldur's story transcends Scandinavia. The mistletoe, small and overlooked like the mistletoe Frigg forgot, binds him to a web of myths where death is never final. From druids to druggists, it whispers the same truth. What harms can also heal, and endings are often hidden beginnings. As we'll see next, this idea of light emerging from darkness takes center stage in Baldur's surprising afterlife, where even Hell's realm can't dim his radiance. Now let's shift our gaze from ancient groves to modern screens, where Baldur's legacy flickers anew in pop culture's imagination. Though he's often overshadowed by Thor and Loki in mainstream retellings, the God of Light has carved his own niche in contemporary stories, evolving while keeping his mythic core intact. Marvel Comics gave Baldur a dramatic entrance in the 1960s, reimagining him as Baldur the Brave, Odin's loyal warrior and Thor's half-brother. Stripped of his invulnerability but steeped in nobility, this version trades Frigg's oaths for battlefield heroics. Yet Marvel slyly nods to his myths, like when Loki exploits his kindness, mirroring the mistletoe's betrayal. His brief MCU cameo in Thor, the Dark World disappointed fans craving his tragic depth, but animated series like The Avengers, Earth's mightiest heroes delve deeper, painting him as Asgard's moral compass, a role that echoes his Norse purity. Beyond comics, Baldur illuminates fantasy novels with surprising versatility. Neil Gaiman's American Gods casts him as a fading deity worshipped by Scandinavian immigrants, his gentleness at odds with America's harshness. Meanwhile, Joanne Harris's The Gospel of Loki reframes his death from the trickster's perspective, blending dark humor with pathos. These takes prove Baldur's myths are more than fodder for superhero battles. They're templates for exploring innocence, grief, and resilience. Perhaps his most poignant modern revival lies in neo-pagan rituals. Among heathens and Asatru practitioners, Baldur symbolizes hope amid darkness. Winter solstice ceremonies often invoke him, with mistletoe wreaths representing his promised return. Some groups even reenact Hermod's ride to hell, meditating on loss and renewal. scholar Jenny Blaine notes how these rites resonate with modern audiences grappling with mortality, transforming ancient grief into communal healing. Even video games weave Balder into their lore. God of War, Ragnarök reinterprets him as a tormented figure straddling light and chaos, while indie titles like Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice use his imagery to explore mental health. Here, his light isn't just divine, it's the flicker of hope in personal struggles. Why does Balder endure? Because his essence, vulnerability, intertwined with resilience, mirrors modern quests for meaning. Whether in a comic panel or a solstice chant, he remains the light that outlives the dark, a beacon for storytellers and seekers alike. And as we'll see next, this symbolic power isn't just storytelling. It's etched into Scandinavia's very landscape, where Balder's name still whispers in wind and stone. Now let's turn our attention to the deeper meaning behind Balder's most defining trait, his radiant light. More than just a divine glow, this luminosity carries layers of symbolism that stretch far beyond the myths themselves, touching on universal themes of hope, renewal, and the eternal dance between life and death. Balder's light is often interpreted as a metaphor for the sun, a vital force in Norse cosmology. In a world where winters were long and darkness threatened survival, the sun's return was more than a celestial event, it was a promise of life's persistence. Balder embodies this promise. His brightness mirrors the sun's journey across the sky, and his death and prophesied return after Ragnarök echo the cyclical fading and rebirth of daylight, especially during the solstices. This connection isn't just poetic, it's rooted in practicality. Ancient Norse communities dependent on agriculture and hunting saw the sun as a lifeline. Balder's myths, then, may have served as a cultural anchor, reinforcing the idea that light and life would always return, no matter how harsh the winter. But his light isn't just about the sun's physical warmth. It's also a beacon of hope in the face of despair. Think of the moment when Balder dies and the gods are plunged into grief. His light doesn't vanish entirely. It lingers in their memories and in the prophecy of his eventual resurrection. This duality, loss intertwined with the promise of return, resonates deeply with human experiences of grief and recovery. It's no accident that modern interpretations, from literature to therapy frameworks, sometimes reference Balder's light as a symbol of enduring hope during personal darkness. His story teaches that even in the bleakest moments, a spark remains, waiting to rekindle. The cyclical nature of his light also mirrors broader Norse beliefs about existence. Unlike linear concepts of time, Norse mythology presents a world of repeating patterns: creation, destruction, and rebirth. Balder's fate is a microcosm of this cycle. His death isn't an end but a pause, a necessary step before renewal. This idea is echoed in natural phenomena. Day follows night, spring follows winter, and in the human experience of generations passing the torch. By embodying this cycle, Balder's light becomes a reminder that endings are often beginnings in disguise. Interestingly, this symbolism extends to artifacts and folklore beyond the Eddas. Archaeological finds, like amulets depicting radiant figures, suggest that Balder's light may have been invoked for protection or blessing. Later Scandinavian traditions, such as lighting candles during the darkest months or weaving sun motifs into crafts, could carry faint echoes of his ancient reverence. Even the Yule log, a centerpiece of winter celebrations, might subtly channel the idea of keeping Balder's light alive through the cold. What makes this symbolism so enduring? Perhaps it's the universality of its themes. Every culture grapples with darkness, literal and metaphorical, and seeks symbols to counteract it. Balder's light, fragile yet unyielding, offers a timeless answer. It's a reminder that hope isn't about avoiding darkness but about trusting in the light's return. And as we'll see next, this trust wasn't just spiritual. It was woven into the very fabric of Scandinavian daily life, where Balder's name and legacy were etched into the land itself. Now let's step beyond the myths and into the tangible traces of Balder's presence in the ancient world. While his stories are etched into poetry, the physical remnants of his worship place names, artifacts, and rituals paint a quieter but equally compelling picture of how people revered this god of light. Across Scandinavia, the land itself whispers his name. Locations like Baldersberg in Denmark or Baldersheimer in Norway suggest settlements or sacred sites dedicated to him. These aren't random labels, they're cultural footprints hinting at communities that sought his protection or celebrated his virtues. The prefix Balder often appears near features like meadows or springs, places associated with purity and vitality, mirroring his divine essence. Even today, a stroll through these areas feels like walking in the shadow of his legacy. But how did this worship translate into practice? Unlike Odin or Thor, whose cults left dramatic markers like temple ruins or weapon offerings, Balder's followers likely honored him through gentler, more intimate rituals. Scholars speculate that his connection to light and renewal might have inspired solstice celebrations, where fires were lit to symbolize his enduring glow during the darkest days. Imagine a village gathering around a flame, sharing stories of Balder's kindness as the snow swirled outside, a ritual as practical as it was spiritual, reinforcing hope in the depths of winter. Artifacts offer another clue, small amulets depicting radiant figures, some clutching what might be mistletoe sprigs, have been unearthed in Viking Age graves. While their exact meaning is debated, their presence in burial sites suggests a plea for Balder's light to guide the departed, much like his own journey to hell. These tokens, often placed near the heart or in the hands of the deceased, blur the line between myth and mortal life, showing how deeply his story resonated in moments of personal loss. One of the most intriguing hints comes from later folklore. Post-Christianization, Scandinavian traditions still carried echoes of Balder's reverence. Farmers in parts of Sweden whispered prayers to Baldur over their fields at planting time, asking for his blessing on the crops. While the church discouraged such practices, the persistence of his name in folk charms woven into rhymes or carved into boundary stones speaks to a devotion that outlasted the old god's official worship. It's a testament to how thoroughly his gentleness and light had seeped into daily life. What's striking is how this cult differed from those of other Norse deities. There are no records of grand sacrifices or battle cries in Balder's name. Instead, his worship seems rooted in quiet gratitude and trust, reflecting his role as a divine comforter rather than a conqueror. This contrast raises a fascinating question. Did his followers see him not just as a god to fear or petition, but as one to emulate? In a pantheon filled with warriors and schemers, Balder's cult might have offered a rare space for peace and reflection. As we piece together these fragments, names, amulets, fading folk customs, we catch glimpses of a devotion that was personal, persistent, and profoundly human. And that leads us to our next chapter, where we'll see how Balder's light didn't fade with the Viking Age, but found new life in the stories and symbols of later generations. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most debated topics in Norse mythology, the striking parallels between Balder and Christ. Scholars have long wrestled with the question of whether these resemblances are coincidental, or if they reveal deeper connections between pagan beliefs and Christianity spread across Scandinavia. At first glance, the similarities are hard to ignore. Both figures are described as beloved, radiant beings whose deaths bring profound grief, and whose stories center on themes of sacrifice and the promise of return. Balder's death, followed by the failed attempt to bring him back from hell, echoes Christ's resurrection narrative, though with a crucial difference: Balder remains in the underworld until Ragnarök. Some argue that Christian scribes, like the 13th century historian Snorri Sturluson, may have subtly reshaped Balder's myths to reflect biblical motifs, blending the two traditions to make Norse lore more familiar to converts. But the debate doesn't end there. Digging deeper, we find that Balder's association with light predates significant Christian influence in the region. Ancient Germanic tribes worshipped gods linked to solar symbolism, and Balder's name itself may derive from words meaning shining or lord, suggesting an older, independent archetype. Could these shared themes simply reflect universal human preoccupations with light, rebirth, and hope in the face of death? The mistletoe's role adds another layer. Just as Christ's crucifixion involves a wooden cross, Balder's demise comes from a seemingly harmless plant turned lethal. Some scholars see this as a possible Christian interpolation, a way to frame Balder's story as a pagan fall narrative. Others counter that the mistletoe's significance in European folklore as a symbol of both life and death likely existed long before Christian contact. The most contentious parallel lies in the aftermath of Balder's prophesied return after Ragnarök to rule a renewed world. This has led some to call him a pagan savior, mirroring Christ's second coming. Yet Norse cosmology lacks the moral dualism of Christianity. Ragnarök is less about redemption than cyclical destruction and rebirth. Here, Balder's return aligns more with natural renewal, like the sun's return after winter, rather than a divine plan for salvation. Interestingly, the Norse themselves may have noticed these overlaps. During the Viking Age, as Christianity gained ground, some converts seemingly merged the two figures in folk practice. Runestones in Sweden, for example, occasionally bear both cross marks and references to Balder, hinting at a syncretic transition where old and new beliefs coexisted. So where does this leave us? While direct Christian influence on Balder's myths can't be proven beyond doubt, the dialogue between these traditions is undeniable. Whether through shared human symbolism or later cultural exchange, Balder's light, like Christ's, endured because it spoke to something timeless, the longing for hope beyond death. Up next, we'll see how this legacy lived on, not just in texts but in the very fabric of Scandinavian life. Now let's step into the enduring world of Balder's legacy, where myth and daily life intertwined across Scandinavia long after the Viking Age. Though the old gods faded with Christianity's rise, whispers of Balder's light never truly vanished. Instead, they found new life in folk traditions, woven into the very fabric of seasonal rituals and protective charms. Take Yule, the ancient winter festival that later merged with Christmas. In parts of Sweden and Norway, villagers would light bonfires or place candles in windows, a practice some scholars link to Balder's symbolic role as a bringer of light during the darkest time of year. Even the Yule log, burned to ensure prosperity, echoes older beliefs in Balder's purifying flame, a remnant of his connection to renewal and the sun's return. These customs weren't just about warmth. They carried echoes of a god whose presence promised hope amid winter's grip. But Balder's influence didn't stop at festivities. Farmers in Denmark and Iceland once carved his name or symbols into doorways and stable walls, believing such marks would shield their homes from harm. These charms, often paired with sun wheel motifs, blurred the line between pagan reverence and Christian devotion. A scrap of poetry from 17th century Iceland speaks of Balder's holy sign, guarding against curses, proof that his mythos still resonated centuries after formal worship ended. Even nature bore his imprint. In remote Norwegian valleys, certain white flowers were called Balder's brows, said to spring from where his tears fell. Folk tales warned against picking them, as if the plant still held a fragment of his sacred innocence. And in healing rituals, mistletoe, once his bane, became a paradoxical talisman, used to ward off illness or bless livestock. Here, the very thing that killed him was repurposed as protection, a twist that honored his enduring duality as both victim and guardian. Perhaps most strikingly, Balder's name lingered in place lore. From Balder's springs in Sweden to Baldersheimer farmsteads in Iceland, these sites kept his memory alive in the land itself. Some locales even tied him to local legends of sleeping heroes, figures who would awaken in times of need, a clear parallel to his prophesied return after Ragnarök. What does this tapestry of traditions tell us? That Balder's legacy wasn't confined to dusty manuscripts. It lived in the crackle of a Yule fire, the scratch of a protective rune, the stories told to children under midnight suns. His light, though transformed, never fully dimmed. And as we close this journey through his tales, consider this: which threads of Baldur's story still shimmer in your world? Share your thoughts below, and may his enduring brightness guide you onward. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to uncover more myths that shape our past and present. Until next time, keep the stories alive. As we draw the threads of Baldur's story together, it's impossible not to be struck by the enduring power of his myth. Here was a god whose very essence was light, pure, radiant, and fragile, yet whose tale is steeped in the deepest shadows of tragedy. That duality is what makes him unforgettable. He isn't just a symbol of brightness, he's a reminder of how easily light can be extinguished and how fiercely we cling to its return. Think about it. Across cultures and centuries, humanity has been drawn to figures like Baldur, beings who embody hope but are fated to suffer. There's something deeply human in that paradox. We see it in the way his stories resonate beyond their Norse roots, echoing in modern tales of heroes who fall too soon or ideals that seem just out of reach. Baldur's appeal lies in this universality. His light isn't just the sun's glow, it's the spark of innocence, the promise of renewal, the flicker of resilience in the face of inevitable darkness. And let's not forget the raw emotion woven into his myth. The grief of Odin, silent and stoic, Frigg's desperate attempts to shield her son only to falter at the last moment. Even the gods, mighty as they were, couldn't escape sorrow. That's why Baldur's story doesn't just sit in the past, it speaks to anyone who's ever loved, lost, or hoped against hope. His legacy isn't just in bonfires or carvings, it's in the quiet moments when we, like the Aesir, find strength in mourning and light in memory. So here's the question for you: which piece of Baldur's saga stayed with you? Was it Frigg's unshakable love, the cruel twist of Loki's betrayal, or the haunting image of his ship burning on the waves? Or perhaps it's the quieter moments, his reunion with Nanna in Hell, the prophecy of his return, or the way his name still lingers in forgotten places. Drop your thoughts below. Let's keep the conversation as alive as the myths themselves. And if these stories lit something in you, don't let it fade. Hit that like button, subscribe to journey deeper into mythology's hidden corners, and ring the bell so you never miss a tale. Until next time, remember, even in the darkest winters, Baldur's light waits to rise again. Carry it with you.